Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in From Paul to Valentinus by Peter Lampe, published in 2003. We're going to look at the conclusion to chapter 3. It'll be pages 23 to 43. And what he does in this chapter is basically he wants to establish an early presence of Christian sections of the city for a Christian dwelling, an established habitation of Christians in Rome at an early period. And a large way to verify this is through the evidence of catacombs. We can date the catacombs fairly early, and it testifies to a Christian presence. And the catacombs were always located close to the region where Christians were in residence. So it was always close to Christian settlements. But of course, what really appeals to us, because I'm a fan of early Christian icons, is I really like the discovery of frescoes painted on the walls in the catacombs. And Lampe does draw attention to those, which I appreciate. Let's go to block 1, take a look at early Christian evidence from the catacombs. The Callisto Catacomb was assigned to one region in the city. Residents maintained the tombs themselves. It was situated along the Via Appia. The Lucina Catacomb, dated around 250 AD. It contains frescoes of Christ's baptism, a fresco of Daniel in the lion's den, a fresco of Jonah, and a fresco of a shepherd bearing a sheep, referencing Christ as a good shepherd. It was a catacomb donated by a wealthy Roman Christian. He became a benefactor. Then there's the Papal Crypt, part of the Callisto Cemetery. Ordinary Christians were buried in the loculi, the tombs cut into the passageways, and then closed up with tiles. All was administered by an ecclesiastical deacon. So one of the functions of the deacon in the church was the administration of the catacomb. The Sebastiano Catacomb, dated pre-240. Pagans and Christians were both buried together. Many Christian symbols were present: the anchor, the fish, the key row. So these catacombs give us a very early testimony to a Christian organized settlement early in Rome. Let's go on to block 2 and continue the examination of the evidence in the catacombs. You have the Protestato Catacomb. It included frescoes of the resurrection of Lazarus, raising Lazarus from the dead, the Samaritan woman at the well, encountering Christ. These frescoes are dated to the mid-3rd century. So middle 200s AD. The Domitia Catacomb. It has frescoes of Noah's Ark, and again a fresco of Daniel in the lion's den, and in this case a fisherman, fishers of men. And this catacomb was dated to around 260 AD, again mid-3rd century. Now the church, and I saw this in a documentary, but the church of St. Paul's outside the walls in Rome, it gets a lot of attention from visitors to Rome. But it is the church that, of course, in the basement area, you have the original tomb of Paul. It has the grave of Paul down in the lower region of the church. The church is built over the grave of Paul. The church did burn in 1823. The cemetery under the church is dated from the 1st to the 3rd century. But that's the church because, Paul was beheaded outside the walls. They took him outside the city walls when he was executed. And that church is the site of his execution and his grave. Now, a very prominent catacomb, the Trastevere. It's along the Via Aurelia. It's the Vatican burial place. Like I said, it's very prominent. It is the Trastevere. And it has the grave of Peter, dated to the early 3rd century. And then the Priscilla catacomb, dated to around 200, includes frescoes of Mary with the Christ child, a shepherd holding a sheep, Christ the Good Shepherd, and it's a part of the Augustan city region. Again, a strong evidence for early Christian settlement. So, block 3, a summary of the conclusions drawn by Peter Lampe. He says that we have to look at the Jewish settlements because they included Christian Jews. And he said the most prominent is the Trastevere across the Tiber, where people from the east lived. Now, some expelled Jews and Christians lived in Arisia in the mountains. So some did, after the expulsion, flee to the region of Arisia. But the Trastevere, that's where east meant west. East met west. People from the east lived in that area. Therefore, Christians lived in that area. And then the port Capena. Now, the port entry, it had many, many churches in that region. And they were spaced like 400 meters away from each other. So a great cluster of Christian presence existed along this port of entry. Again, evidence of a organized Christian settlement in Rome, very early, very, very early. And then I thought this was interesting. In the business district of the Piscina Publica, there was a Christian bank, a Trapezza. In the Augustan region of the city, obviously evidence of a strong Christian settlement. They even had a bank. So, in summary, there were 3 dominant Christian settlements. Trastevere region was one, the Porta Capena was another, and the 12th and 13th Augustan regions was a third, left of the Via Appia. Basically, wherever eastern migration met western Rome, wherever east met west, you had Christian settlements coming from Alexandria, coming from Antioch, coming from the east. But I like the fact that he really did also bring up the evidence of the frescoes in the catacombs, because even though obviously, as we've already discussed, some Roman leaders even converted to Christianity, Christian presence was tolerated. I mean, they had a bank, they lived in the business district, they had Christian settlements, but it was Christian worship that was not tolerated. So very strange. It looks like there was an organized Christian presence in the Roman city very early on, but worship was driven underground, mainly because of the skirmishes with the Jews in the synagogues, and they ended up worshiping many times in the catacombs. But I think it's interesting that they have these frescoes that are still there today as evidence of Christian art very early. And evidently from the 1st to the 3rd century, most of the dating was 1st to 3rd century. So I found that to be interesting that Professor Lampe brought up for us. But it does give you a little bit different picture from what we usually think. You know, we think of, anyway, I do. I think of what I see in the movies like Paul, an apostle of Christ, where it shows Aquila and Priscilla leading a organized Christian settlement that is in hiding in the city, and they are in hiding from Nero. And that's kind of the picture we get. But from this research here, it's evident that Christians did have an established Christian settlement and even Christian business presence and Christian church presence if it was attached to a high Roman official. And the only Christian Jews that were expelled and forced to flee were prominent Christians like Aquila and Priscilla. But it looks like they're, according to this lesson from Lampe, that there was a very organized Christian settlement in early Rome. So it's a great little lesson. That's going to wrap up chapter 3. That wraps up pages 23 to 43. The next lesson is going to be chapter 4. It'll be pages 48 to 68. So next lesson will be chapter 4, pages 48 to 68. That wraps up chapter 3.